Welcome to Pro Practice, your guide to piano mastery. I'm Josh Wright, and today's tutorial is based on Intermezzo in E-flat major, Op.117 No.1 by Johannes Brahms. This gorgeous piece was written during the summer of 1892 during his stay in Bad Ischl. Clara Schumann later found out that he had written these and asked him to send them to her, and she loved these pieces. There was a lot of positive reception around these pieces. He jokes around a bit that these are 3 lullabies of my grief, and there's an inscription of 2 lines from a Scottish ballad, Lady Anne Bothwell's Lament, right in the score, and translated it means, "Baloo, my babe, lie still and sleep. It grieves me sore to see thee weep." This is one of those pieces that just makes you grateful to be alive, and we're going to get into so many actionable tips and strategies that you can use to get better at voicing, for pedaling, and many other concepts. But before we get started, I thought I would just play the first 2 lines here, the first 8 bars, in case you're not familiar with this beautiful work. We'll stop there because it repeats after that. This is in ternary form. It's pretty obvious where the ternary form is because he has a big fermata right before the B section. But we see that the A section is in E-flat major, what we just covered. And then the B section goes to E-flat minor, so the parallel minor. And he writes più adagio. So that's something to keep in mind. I have listened to many recordings of this. Each has beautiful qualities, but my favorite would be Radu Lupu, and probably pretty equal to that would be a recording that my friend Spencer Meyer made, partly probably because it's so similar to Radu Lupu's playing. It's so tender and patient and beautiful. So if you don't know Spencer Meyer or haven't heard him play, I would highly recommend checking him out. His last name is spelled Meyer, and he has a recording of this on YouTube. So definitely check that out. Radu Lupu. I listened to other recordings, Sokolov, Glenn Gould, Andras Schiff, Perez, and many others. But you can choose which one you like. The reason I bring up all of those recordings is each one takes a slightly different tempo. Some move along. And it is easier to shape when you move it along a little bit more. We'll talk about that little grace note there as well in a moment, because some people put it on the beat. Lupu puts it on the beat, and so I did because that's my favorite recording. It is an acciaccatura, though, which has a little backslash through it, and so generally you put those before the beat. And I'd say the vast majority of recordings I listened to did put it before the beat, but I did like it on the beat slightly more. All of that to say, in bar 21, at the start of the B section, we see più adagio, so we need to go slower. So you want to make sure whatever tempo you take here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that you take a tempo that is fast enough that you can actually contrast it 1 and 2 and 3 and this doesn't drag too much. This is quite slow and introspective, especially in Lupu's recording, but I really like it. We'll talk about some imagery there that I like to think about to really enhance that section. And then we see the main theme come back So the return of the A section, this ternary form, 3-part form. In bar 38. Such a glorious, beautiful piece. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with the elephant in the room, which is voicing. Voicing, I've actually posted the last 2 YouTube tutorials right before this sample that I'll post to YouTube, and then I'll obviously post the full tutorial of this to the Pro Practice course. But voicing is such an important concept, which means bringing out a melodic line over accompaniment notes. So where is the line? Do we want... Probably not. That's quite boring. And left hand doesn't really offer us that much. So we really want to bring out this moving line. And then Brahms will play on that later if we see bar 13, which we'll get to shortly. But he plays T-da-da-da-da-dum. He doesn't do it in the same rhythm, but... So beautiful how he makes little variations on that. If we look over in bar 50, we see another variation of that. And then I already showed you the variation with those kind of bells singing up top as well. The reason I have my phone out is I wanted to, I clocked Lupu's recording because I think his is probably as slow as you'd want to go, somewhere between 72 and 80. So this would be on the slow side, tick, 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 and maybe up to 80 because there's quite a bit of rubato. Tee-da-dum-pum. So we don't want to be any slower than that. Okay. Let's talk about pedaling as well, just to get started. Then we'll jump into the voicing, I promise. So, change, change, change. And I also have the pedal cam going. You can take a look at that. And then change, 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 change. I do like to keep the melody quite a bit purer there than I do when it comes back in the return of the A section. I like this to be a little more colorful. I did hear some recordings that would feather that pedal out and do change, change. To me, it sounds too sterilized. Like it tears all that bass out. And I think having some color and blending in there is quite gorgeous. And especially if your voicing is good. If your voicing's bad, it's going to get too muddy. So let's go to voicing. I have many different voicing concepts posted to YouTube that you can check out, but I'll run you through them really quickly. So the first thing that I like to go over with students is the exercise I learned when I was 9 or 10 years old from Susan Duhlmeyer, such a brilliant teacher. So... can you tell what I'm doing? I'm doing forte legato on my main melody, and then and staccato pianissimo on my accompaniment notes. What that does is that gets the hand used to putting more emphasis on and if this is a little bit jagged, I guess you could say, you know, as you have to kind of lift the hand. That's okay when you're doing this exercise. I would encourage you to do it dry. Now, a lot of students ask, do I keep doing that when I'm actually playing? No, you don't do staccatos because that actually promotes it to ring out more if you're not very careful. So when you're actually putting this in context, you keep the hand very quiet. or however you want to do that. What that will do is that'll immediately start to feature that line. By the way, those pedal changes are very rounded and very subtle. You don't want these really obvious pedal changes, because if you have really obvious pedal changes, sometimes it can bleed into the way you play it, and your playing starts to sound vertical if your pedaling is really vertical. So be careful of that. Additionally, where do you want to go with this line? And I've gone back and forth on what I want to do. So do you want to start out more and then diminuendo all the way to there? That's one option. Or do you want to start out soft and go to the middle and then diminuendo? Or do you, I'm giving you a lot of options here because I want you to choose your favorites. I'm not trying to confuse you. I'm trying to give you options and see which one you like. And then here's another one, just kind of two small micro phrases. Kind of getting soft, and then another breath in, and then soft, and then okay, or okay. The one thing I would avoid, if you're gonna do that acciaccatura before the beat, don't do it too lazily. Or don't bring it out. So it's just very subtle. Also, to play softer, flatten the fingers slightly, and you can think of pulling back on the keys a little bit. Basically, key dip on, at least on a Steinway, is standard key dip. How far the key goes down is 4/10 of an inch. So what we do when we pull the key back like that, we're making that key dip feel longer because we're doing it on a diagonal. So we're spreading that out to basically an inch. So that allows us to feel a lot more control over the attack of the hammer on the string. So just something to keep in mind. What one do I like the best? I kind of like all the micro phrases, but each one has its own level. So maybe I'll start out a little bit more, and then even less, and then more. Because Brahms did write 4 individual slurs, I want to also talk about one of my pet peeves in certain recordings that I've heard. I won't obviously name any names because each recording has its own strengths and beautiful things. But the thing that drives me nuts, and I've heard students do this too, is when people rush through their long notes. When they go... It's probably what I sound like on these tutorials. I jump into the next sentence, and then I go on to this, and then it's someone talking like that. They never give a pause and let you digest the material. And you don't want someone who's doing that too much either. But wait. Then when you wait like that, it actually gives momentum to the phrase. So here I do like to